Hi, in this part of the session, we will look at AWS EC2. We will understand what are the services, uh, what are the types, and the technicalities involved in. So, a very good material to go through would be the FAQs. So, if you type EC2 FAQs, you will get this page. So, let us understand what is EC2 first. Consider EC2 as your server. In a client server architecture, you would provision a actual server. So EC2 is your server, which will be used to install applications like Informatica, Tableau, Cognos, DataStage, etc. And it is used to provide compute capabilities. It also has an inherent storage associated with it. Plus, it can also be plugged with EBS. This is important. EC2 uh, can have an instance store to store the data, but that is temporary. And EC2 can also be plugged with EBS. So that is permanent solution for data storage. Now, what advantage does EC2 have over the traditional on-premises servers? So if you see, the main advantage here is, EC2 reduces the time required to obtain and boot new server instances, and it happens in minutes. So in on-premises section, if you have to do the same, you will have to do a procurement exercise of those hardwares, and then you will have to do an install of applications there. Here, the provisioning happens very quickly in minutes. That is a great advantage. And the advantage is because you can quickly scale up and down for your computing requirements. Okay. The third advantage is you are only paying for pay as you go. Like if you are using it on an hourly basis, you have to pay on an hourly basis. Plus, it has other features like you can reserve the instance in case you're definite that you would need it for 2 to 3 years time span. Now, how can you get started with EC2? So, if you have an account and if you have a management console, you can open EC2 and work on it. It's as simple as that. It uses your phone number for verification, so it sends a pin just to make sure that this is the right and a genuine phone number, because the billing would happen accordingly. So now the question is, what can developers do now with EC2 which in on-premises they could not? So like I already explained, suppose if you are a developer and you think that, okay, I have an idea, I will create a tool and I'll try the deployment. Now you have to procure the hardware and those kind of stuff. Unless you already have a big set of hardware supporting it, you will have to procure it. So this gives your developers, EC2 gives your developers the elastic nature of service. Okay, you can quickly scale up. You can quickly start an EC2 instance. You can start with a small T3 micro instance, and you can slowly scale up based on your requirements. So this is very flexible. That is one thing, and you can use it for a fixed amount of time. And you can also, suppose you think that now you no longer need it, you can terminate the instance. Okay, so even if the usage is rapidly changing or unpredictable, you can meet all of those requirements because you have a concept of auto scaling group, ASG, using which, suppose if you start with two instances, and if the network traffic and the number of requests coming in from the network increases, the ASG will scale up. Scale up means if you have two instances and you told that if the network traffic increases, to scale it up to 5 instances. So it will add 3 more instances on the fly based on the requirement. Once the request goes down, it will scale down. Scale down means it will remove these 3 instances so that your cost is at bay. Now, Let us understand, like if you want to start an EC2 instance, so you can start it by running the run instance API call. Okay, so these are all on-demand instances, and if you have to suppose on-demand through API, you can fire these commands. And if you want more than 20 on-demand instances, then you have to fill a separate form. If you want to check if what is the status of your instance, then you should put a describe instance API call. Uh, you can also terminate your instances programmatically through API calls. So you can use terminate instance API call. Like if you you have an option that you can use EBS boot partition to boot your EC2 instances. If you're using that, then in if you want to restart, so you can use a stop instance API call, and then you can use a start instance API call to restart. So this is a start instance API call to restart. So what it does is, if you are doing this restart, so data is not lost. Okay, that you can assure. And then if you see here, you have spot instance. Uh, so it is just like a bidding thing, like eBay, where you bid for commodities. So this spot instance is where you bid for the EC2 time, and if your bid is good enough, it will allocate it. But if someone bids higher than you and you are already using the spot instance, it will go away with a warning of 2 minutes. Now you can also start instances, terminate instances from the management console. Okay, but in the exam you will be asked about API calls from CLI, how you will do it, from console, how will you do it. So you should know all of these. Now let us understand. EC2 you can use local instance store as well as elastic block store. So these can be used as your root devices. What is the difference? Difference is this local instance store is a temporary storage. Your root data will be lost if the instance is terminated. If you store it on EBS, your root data will not be lost if the instance is terminated. This is a simple difference. Now, why on earth will someone store the data on a temporary store? So it can be used, for example, this is the use case where you want to run large websites where each instance is a clone to handle traffic. So this is just, where the loss of data will not impact you because this is just a clone. You can use in such scenarios. How quickly the systems will be running? So 10 minutes, it will take 10 minutes. Once you put a run instance call, it will take 10 minutes. Now this will also depend, it's logical, right? If your size of AMI is huge, then obviously this will not be 10 minutes. If the number of instances is, if you have one instance, then it will be 10 minutes. But if you have 10 instances, then the time may be longer. Okay. And if again here some sort of caching works, if that AMI has been launched before, it will take less time. Otherwise, if it is a first time launch of that particular AMI, then it will take a bit longer to boot. Now it is important to understand the concept of AMI, that is Amazon Machine Image. So what happens is, suppose you create a dev box, okay, you used an AMI, and post that you installed some of your additional applications, for example Informatica, Cognos or Tableau or ClickSense, some sort of applications. Now uh, you also install a database. It can be an RDS database, it can be Oracle, SQL Server, etc. Now your work in dev is done. You want to push this to the test box, but you first have to create or install all of these softwares in the test box. So instead of doing the install from scratch, you have an option where you create an AMI. Okay, to create an AMI, it is an easy option. You create an AMI of one environment and then deploy it in the other environment. For storage perspective, you can use EBS and Amazon S3. It provides storage for AMIs. So AMI purposes, from one environment you create an AMI, deploy to the other environment. That is a faster way of. It's a AMI is a image basically. So even in your organizations, if you are seeing your hardware team when they install a laptop, install the operating system on the laptop, they have all those applications like Word and etc. So it goes in as an image. They don't have to do a reinstall. Post operating system install, they don't have to install Word, Excel, and etc. etc. We saw in the earlier section where we told we will put a run instance call. So run instance, suppose it creates 20 EC2 instances. Now each EC2 instance will have a DNS name. So how will you refer it? You will always refer it through the DNS names given to each of the system that was booted. Okay, this is important. Each EC2 instance can be referred by the DNS names. Now, the question is how many instances you can run on Amazon EC2. So it is, limited to your virtual CPU for the on-demand instance. If you see the on-demand instance, uh, these are the number of instances you can create. So if you have 128 CPU for F instances, you can create 128 instances and so on. So mostly everything is 128 except for these, which is 1152 virtual CPUs, and then uh, you know it is limited to 20 reserved instances. So that is a fixed number, and for the spot instances, it again depends upon the dynamic spot limit per region. Now, one thing to remember about the spot instance request limits. So this is important. So there is a request limit for spot instance. If you get this error, no max spot instance count, that means your limit has increased, and you can request for an increase of limit so that you do not get this error. Another important thing is you also have spot fleet limits. Okay, so this is like spot fleets and EC2 fleets per region is 1,000. This is important, and so here there is some more limit, and this spot fleet request cannot span across regions. Okay, it has to be in the same region and in the same it can span across different availabilities in the same AZ also. And we also have T3 and T2 spot instances. T3 primarily is used to save your CPU credits that you have. So you can, that if you are going to use it for 30 minutes for sure, and so you can launch it for a short duration with no idle time, so that you can get some CPU credit. You can save some CPU time in your reserve instances, or your on-demand instances, so you can use a less expensive way to save some credits. Now, from your EC2 instances, you can send emails, but that is restricted to few emails. But you can increase that amount if you are for sure that you want a higher limit. You can do that also by filling out this form. On the which operating systems? So there are some default AMIs which are there, and which operating systems do they cover? This is the list. It's a big list. The important ones are Linux, Windows, so Ubuntu, Red Hat, Enterprise Linux, SUSE Linux Enterprise, Fedora, CentOS, Gentoo. You can remember these. Oracle Linux. Now, if there happens to be a question on ECC memory, EC2 uses ECC memory. So all of even your laptop uses EC2 memory. What it does is, it is error correction code memory. So it will automatically fix the errors in your file. If it is corrupted, it will automatically fix it. So nowadays, most of the devices they use this. So this is a common sense question. Now let's look at the vCPU limits. Okay, so if you see this, Nano will have one CPU, Nano, Micro, Small, Medium will have one. Medium onwards, Large will have two, then extra large. It will keep on extrapolating. You can double the size. So large will have 8, 3 large will have 12, and keep on increasing. Okay, so this is the total number of vCPUs. So in our previous example, we saw these instances. These are all 128 CPUs because these are all 32x large uh, instances. How can you increase your instance limits, or where can you see these instance limits? So you can see it in this service quota console. Okay, this is important on the EC2 console or from the service quota console. You can see this. Now, in the current year, if you see, there is a limit on where EC2 sends emails to port 25. There is a restriction put for SMTPs. So you have to submit a request to remove that sending limitations and to lift the restrictions. Okay. So you must have a very valid use case because this was causing security issues. You must have a very valid use case to use it. And the email relay service that is used here is Amazon Simple Email Service. We also have SNS notification service, but that is used for notification. But for sending emails across to different ports, we use Simple Email Service. And this is important to remember that Amazon has an SLA that it will be up for 99.99% on a monthly basis. This is the uptime percentage. And EBS it's same for EC2 and EBS within the region. And if it is not available for 99.99 percentage, then you will get a SLA credit, which you can use next month also. Now let us look at storage. So there are three kinds of storage. One is EPS, the other is EFS, the third is NVMe instance storage. So instance storage is a temporary storage, and these two are permanent in nature. Okay, that's the difference. So let's look into details of EBS. So in the exam, you can continuously see questions being asked around this, and they are tricky questions. What will happen if my instance is terminated? Will the data be safe, or it will be wiped out, etc. Now, like we told, the storage in EBS is permanent in nature, so it persists independently of the life of the instance. Even if the instance terminates, your data in EBS volume would be secure. Okay, but you also have to ensure that if you are using EBS volume as a root partition to boot your EC2 instance, then you should ensure that your delete on terminate flag. So this delete on terminate flag is should be n. Okay, this is very important. If it is y, then your data will be lost. It has to be n. If it is n, then only your data will be secured even if the system terminates. That is a question. Now, performance of EBS volume. So EBS, they have two categories of storage. One is SSD backed. This is merely for transactional workloads, and second is SSD backed for throughput intensive workload. Throughput intensive, lot of reads, lot of writes, and this is for transactional workloads. Okay. So let us understand, like, if you have to improve the performance, what needs to be done here. Okay. So uh, from a performance perspective, you always use EBS optimized instances. So which are the EBS optimized instances which are free? This is mouse, cat, and dog. M4, C4, C5, D2. This is free. Otherwise, you can pay for these. This is free. So it is always recommended use the EBS optimized instances because they keep the network traffic and the traffic within the EC2 and EBS separate. That is the key. How it is optimized is network traffic is separate and the traffic between EBS volumes and EC2 is handled separately. This is the key. Now let us look at a concept of initializing volumes. Why we do it? Suppose you have created a volume from a snapshot. So better you should access each block uh, before you are putting that volume into production. Like, you have a ABS volume, you are attaching it to your EC2 instance, which is in production. Before you do that, you have to ensure that there is a initialization happening. How do you initialize it? By accessing each block prior to putting the volume into production, because that is the most time consuming activity which degrades the performance. The other method is use a fast snapshot. What it does is, if you are when you're creating a snapshot and you're using a fast snapshot, or when you're restoring it you use a fast snapshot restore, that time it restores as well as it fully initializes it at creation itself, so it will be performance efficient. Now let's look at SGD volumes. SGD volumes are of two types. One is throughput optimized SGD, that is ST1, and cold SGD, that is SC1. So similar to S3 and Glacier. So this, consider this similar to your S3, and this is your Glacier, like cold storage. Okay. What it does is, these volumes, both the volumes are backed by hard disk drives. Okay, but SC1 is lowest cost because you have to move cold data. Cold data means the workloads with large cold data sets, not being accessed very frequently. So ST1 is used, for frequently accessed high throughput intensive workloads, just like your MapReduce data sets, or ETLs is a very good example. The ETL workloads where you need a lot of read writes, that is best for that. So it gives a maximum throughput of 500 MB per second. This gives a maximum throughput of 250 MB per second, and the baseline throughput is 40 MB per terabyte. Here the baseline is 12 MB per terabyte. This is important, and you can burst up to 250 MB per terabyte, MB per second per terabyte, and here you can burst up to 80 MB per terabyte. Now STT means throughput, and SC1C means cold storage. Just to remember it in the exam. So this question is important for the exam. Can multiple instances be attached to the same volume? No, you cannot. Okay, but you can attach multiple volumes to a single instance. But multiple instances cannot be attached to a single volume. Now, if you have to take snapshots, can you take it using Amazon S3 API? No, you cannot. You cannot. Only EC2 APIs will be allowed. So do you need to unmount the volumes before taking a snapshot? No, not really needed. But if you want a very good clean snapshot, it's better that you unmount the volumes, take a snapshot, and then mount it back. Or if you have ABS volume that is serving as your root device, then you should shut down the machine, take a clean snapshot. Okay, that is important. Taking a clean snapshot is important. Our snapshot version, there is no versioning, but each snapshot has a unique identifier. Using that identifier, you can create volumes based from your old existing snapshots also. Now, will you be charged if somebody else takes your snapshot and creates the volume? You will not be charged. But if you are using somebody else's snapshot and creating a volume, then you will be charged. Suppose you create a snapshot and then you are sharing that snapshot with multiple users. So can they change your data? So the original snapshot data cannot be changed. They can create a volume from that snapshot and then they can change the data in the volume, but your original snapshot remains unchanged. Now, how can you know that you have access to certain snapshots? Go into your AWS Management Console and check the private snapshot section in the snapshot section. Okay, so whatever you can see in the private snapshot section, that means you have access to those snapshots. Now, whatever you can see in the public snapshot, that means it is publicly available. Anybody can access those snapshots. Okay, is your EBS snapshots and volumes encrypted? Yes, it is all encrypted, and it is encrypted to meet your security and encryption compliance requirements. This is very important. So it is already encrypted by default. If you want to see what are the Amazon snapshots that are available, you can go to the public dataset section of AWS Management Console and choose Amazon snapshots. There you can see it. These can be certain set of data sets which are already available, which Amazon provides. You don't need to worry about where to source that data. That data is already available. Go to public data sets. These are the public data sets in Management Console, and use Amazon snapshots. Choose whatever snapshot you want. Now let's look at into Amazon Elastic File System. So the Elastic File System, it is just like it is mounted to your Linux EC2 instance. Only Linux AMIs can be used for with EFS. Windows or other AMIs cannot be used. And EFS uses the NFS 4.1 version protocol. That is important. From a AMI perspective, like I told, only Linux-based AMIs can be used here, and one EFS can be linked to multiple instances. That is an important information. Okay. How can you load data in EFS? You can do it through EC2 instances or from your in-premises. Your in-premises setup can also connect to EFS and load the data there. See, your EC2 is inside your VPC, so EFS can be accessed there. But if you're using the older version of EC2, that is the EC2 Classic instances, then you will have to mount a file system via the Classic link. That's how you can access EFS. This is an important question. How many EC2 instances can connect to a file system? It's 1 to 1000 relationship. You can connect as many you want. Now let's look at the temporary instance store, that is NVMe instance storage. So what instance types this instance offers? These are the range of instance types. I'm not sure if we will have to remember it, but if you can grab some of the names, that is fine. Now, is the data stored on Amazon storage encrypted? Yes, it is all encrypted. It is stored on the AWS Nitro hardware, and it is all encrypted. What is the algorithm used for encryption? It is XGS ES256 block cipher. This is what is used. So the encryption keys, you should remember, these encryption keys are unique to an instance. Okay, if you have three instances, so the encryption keys that are there, they are unique for the instances within the Nitro hardware module. This is important to understand. So if your instance is terminated, then your all keys are irrecoverably destroyed. So you cannot recover any of the data, etc. It is all destroyed. Suppose if you want to disable the encryption, can you do it? No, you cannot disable the instance storage encryption. So the published IOPS means the IO, how much is the IO, that already considers that encryption will be done. So if the encryption is done, then the latency can be a bit higher, but the IOPS numbers published already considers that. So from a key generation perspective, one thing is important, that customer generated keys is not supported here. These are all only S3 encryption is supported here. Now let's look at EFA. So EFA is the elastic fiber adapter. So what it does is basically this is for high performance. So for high performance applications, you know, it provides consistent latency and higher throughput compared to the traditional TCP channels. Okay. So if your business priorities changes, you can use EFA support to automatically scale up, uh, and whichever EC2 instances it has been supported on. Majorly, most of the large category EC2 instances support EFA. So, what instance type support EFA? You see, almost of the large ones support metal one supports. So, EFA cannot be enabled if the instance is running. Okay, you have to shut down the instance. It cannot be attached to running instance. It can be enabled either at the launch of the instance or added to a stopped instance. So elastic IP, 5 elastic IP per region is a uh, limitation. Those elastic IP, you already know IPv4 IP addresses are getting exhausted, and now IPv6 are getting launched. So 5 is the limit. If you want to increase it, you will have to give a detailed justification to AWS why you think more than 5 is needed. Now, elastic IPs are very rare commodities. You have to use it judiciously. That's why, if your IP, if your elastic IP addresses are not associated with a running instance, normally people will say, okay, if it is not associated, then there is no billing being happening. But the billing is running because they want you to judiciously use the elastic IP addresses, and if it is not associated, then you should not use it. All the DNS record, sorry for the reverse DNS record, all the elastic IPs usually have this DNS, reverse DNS record. Do we need that each EC2 instance have an elastic IP? No. So each EC2 instance comes with a public IP and a private IP. So this is as a private IP, and there is an internet routable public IP. So the private IP address remains associated with the network interface so ideally both the private and public, if the instance is running, it is associated with it, and then it is released. There is no need that I mean, only for certain business cases you need elastic IP. If you need elastic IP, then you replace public IP with the elastic IP. Let's quickly look at the elastic load balancing. So there are two types. First is classic, and the other is application load balancer. So the classic one is more suitable, to route the traffic to multiple EC2 instances, and the application load balancer is good for routing traffic to EC2 instances where advanced capabilities or application capabilities are needed, like you have microservices and containers deployed. That is very good for that kind of feature.